Okay, you know the drill. You sit down to study, you're focused, you are ready to go, but then a notification buzzes. Just a quick check, you tell yourself. And then an hour later, you kind of snap out of it, realizing you've been scrolling through a social media black hole and have no idea where the time went. Look, we've all been there. We all feel like our phones are hurting our grades, but what does the data actually show? So, here's how we're going to get to the bottom of this. First, we'll lay out the big question we're trying to answer. Then, we're going to look at why the old way of researching this was, well, pretty flawed. After that, we'll explore a much smarter method. Then comes the good stuff, what the data actually tells us. And most importantly, we'll wrap up with what it all means for you. Let's dive in. At its core, the question is really simple, right? Are our phones wrecking our grades? We all have this gut feeling that they are, but proving it with cold, hard data, that has been a massive challenge for researchers. It's one thing to feel distracted, but it's a whole other ballgame to actually measure its impact precisely. I mean, this experience is pretty much universal. Researchers actually have a name for it: media-induced task switching. And get this, studies show students, on average, get distracted in less than 6 minutes before switching over to some kind of tech. 6 minutes! That's why figuring this out is so important. For years, the main way researchers tried to tackle this was, well, pretty simple. They just asked students. They'd hand out surveys with questions like, so how much time do you spend on social media? It seems straightforward enough, doesn't it? But it turns out this entire approach has a massive fundamental flaw. Let's just be real with ourselves for a second. If you had to guess, right now, how many hours you spent on your phone yesterday, how close do you think you'd be? A little over, maybe? A little under? The truth is, we're just awful at this. And here is the reality check. Research found that, on average, we're not just a little bit off, we underestimate our actual phone use by a whopping 40%. Just let that sink in. If the data you start with is that wrong, any conclusion you build on top of it is pretty much useless. So yeah, this is exactly why surveys just don't cut it. They rely on our terrible memories, not real data. They have what scientists call low validity, which is a fancy way of saying what people say they do doesn't match what they actually do. And they totally miss the details. It's not just about the total time we spend, but how often we pick up the phone, which is something we're even worse at remembering. So, to get a real answer, some researchers at the University of Trento in Italy came up with a much better approach for a project they called Smart Unit. They basically decided, okay, let's stop asking and start tracking. But they added a really clever twist. So check out the difference. Instead of relying on fuzzy memories, this new method logged actual usage data right from the students' phones. But, and this is the genius part, they combined that objective, hard data with diary entries to understand the context. So they didn't just know what apps students were using, they knew where they were and what they were supposed to be doing at the time. Here's the nitty-gritty. 72 students installed an app called iLog. This thing collected all the data on which apps they used and for how long. But here's the key. Every 30 minutes, it would pop up and ask them a simple question. What are you doing right now? This is how the researchers knew if that phone use was happening during a lecture or a study session or just while chilling out. And they got super specific. They didn't just look at total time. They broke usage down into 3 key metrics. S for sessions, that's how often you open an app. D for duration, that's how long you stay in the app each time. And I for inactivity, this is a big one. It measures the time you spend off your phone between sessions. This gives a way richer picture of our habits. Okay, so with this powerful new method in place, what did they actually find? It's time to let the data tell its story. And trust me, the results are pretty fascinating. First up, something a little surprising. Students actually use social media more often and for longer periods when they were studying alone compared to when they were sitting in a lecture. It seems like the structure of a classroom, having a professor there, actually helps fight off distraction a little bit. And what apps were they using? Well, it turns out instant messaging apps, think WhatsApp, were checked most often. Those are your quick, high-frequency hits. But social networking sites like Instagram or Facebook were where they spent the most time in one go. Those are the real-time syncs. Okay, so this is where it all comes together. Here's what the data showed had a real impact. Getting stuck in long messaging chats while studying, that was bad for academic performance. In a lesson, both checking social media a lot and getting lost in long sessions were harmful. But
And this is probably the most important discovery. The longer the period of inactivity, that's the time spent focused between checking your phone, the stronger the positive link to better grades.
And check out this really interesting little twist. The negative impact of all this distraction was actually bigger on the quantity of work students got done, so the number of credits they earned, than on the quality of that work, like their final grades. It's like the multitasking was slowing them down from finishing their work in the first place. So what on earth are we supposed to do with all this information? Let's boil it all down to the final takeaway. What does this data actually mean for our own habits, and how can we use it to study smarter? Here's the bottom line. First, context is everything. Using your phone in class is worse than using it while studying alone. Second, not all apps are created equal. Those long social media black holes and the constant quick checks of messaging apps are the real grade killers. But look, the goal isn't to get to zero phone use. That's not realistic. It's about managing it. And the single most important thing you can do is increase that inactivity time. Actively try to stretch out the time between when you pick up your phone. And hey, don't just take it from me. The researchers themselves summed it up perfectly. They found that the most powerful thing for academic success wasn't just using social media less. It was about actively creating longer periods of focused, uninterrupted time away from the phone. It's not about elimination. It's about the quality of your focus when you're off screen.
So there you have it. The data has told its story. It's not about treating your phone like it's the enemy. It's about being smarter, more intentional with our focus. So the real question now is, knowing what you know, how are you going to manage your time and your attention?